Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the best place for the best takes. I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. I certainly did. I'll be honest, there were two individuals in the sports world that made me very upset over the weekend. I'm going to start with public enemy number one, Dillon Brooks, who is now claiming that the media made him out to be the villain. He is taking zero accountability for his actions or anything he has said. He's saying that guys like myself painted him to be the villain, and that's why everyone thinks poorly of him now. Let's start with the origin story of this little drama, at least for this series, because if we go back to this season, there's been a lot of things that Dillon Brooks has said that has made people upset, but let's focus on this series. Last week, after a game, Dillon Brooks made some post-game interview comments saying that LeBron James was old and that he doesn't respect anyone until they drop 40 on him. And everyone expected the stat line of a lifetime from LeBron James in their next meeting on Saturday night at 10 p.m., and that was not the case. That's not LeBron James' style, and I know a lot of us wanted to see that, but realistically, we weren't going to. He is not... LeBron James doesn't channel his aggression the same way that guys like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan did. He's a different cat. He's not super confrontational. He's never been that kind of a guy. He's not a scorer first, as we've talked about. He's a pass first guy. He's got a different style and a different way of doing things. So while we wanted to see that, it wasn't going to happen. And LeBron James still put up a great stat line in a very dominant game for the Lakers. They absolutely trounced the Memphis Grizzlies in that game. And in that game, of course, the next big drama with Dillon Brooks was when he cup-checked LeBron James in the middle of the game. And it was after a very frustratingly bad performance from Dillon Brooks. So, yeah, I do think it was intentional, if I am giving my take on that. Yes, I think it was intentional. I don't think it was unintentional. And I think a lot of people are giving him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't give Draymond Green the benefit of the doubt. I know I didn't say it on the show, but that was definitely intentional from Draymond Green. He knew what he was doing. Dillon Brooks knew what he was doing as well. So we'll leave it at that. But now after the game, Dillon Brooks is saying, the media making me a villain, the fans making me a villain, and then that just creates a whole different persona on me. Brooks said, what? What is he talking about? He's acting like he didn't bring this upon himself. He trash-talked and chirped one of the greatest players of all time, one of the most dominant players of all time, one of the best current get-a-bucket guys in the league, and he thought he was going to get away with it, and now he thinks that it's on us for portraying him in this light. Dillon Brooks poked the bear. He said it. He was okay with poking the bear, and now he's trying to retreat after he not only had one of the worst performances I've ever seen a basketball player have, but also allowed the guy that he was going to lock up, allowed him to have one of the best performances possible, and allowed his team to have one of the best games they've had all year in a very dominant Lakers win. Give me a break. Get out of here. Dillon Brooks knew exactly what he was doing, and now he's trying to walk back what he said and trying to blame everyone else around him because of his stupidity and him saying one of the most egregious things that I've ever heard a player say about LeBron James. I mean, he's at a new level of ridiculousness. Dillon Brooks was 7 points, 0 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 turnover, and an ejection. That was his stat line during that game after he made one of the most aggressive comments that I've ever seen a basketball player make about someone else. Look, Dillon Brooks, this guy is not a number 1 option on his team. He is not a number 2 option on his team. This guy is a glorified role player who has been talking trash all year long, who is trying to seemingly fit into a Draymond Green stereotype of, I want to be the aggressive guy. I want to be the defensive guy on my team. I want to be the guy who ruffles everyone's feathers. He's not that. He's not Rodman. He's not a Draymond Green. He's not the defensive cornerstone of a great dynasty. He hasn't won anything. He hasn't won a single ring. No NBA Finals appearances. Like, his talking over the past season has been insane. I've touched upon it throughout the past couple months. I talked about how the Memphis Grizzlies are probably the most hated team in the NBA, but this has gotten to a whole other level of craziness. I mean, seriously, Dillon Brooks is getting to the point where he is delusional. He is out of touch with reality. He's the one who poked the bear. He's the one who started this fight. He's just upset because he's not the one who ended it on his terms. He looks really bad in front of everyone because he couldn't back up his talk, and now he's blaming everyone else. This is ridiculous. This is an all-time clown move by a player who is seriously trying a little bit too much. He's being a little bit too extra, and I'll leave it at that. But very upsetting words from Dillon Brooks. Very frustrating. I suppose if his goal is to try and get us to talk about him, he has certainly achieved that, because no one is going to stay silent about how ridiculous this is from Dillon Brooks. All these antics of being the perpetrator of the problem and, stoking the fire and then acting like, oh, I don't have any part in this. No, everyone's painting me out to be this guy. I'm a saint. Give me a break. Saturday night was so fun as a sports fan. Don't get me wrong, it was really hectic, but it was a lot of fun, especially as the evening wore on. I had one screen set up for the ending of the Miami Heat game. I had another screen on the start of the Lakers game. And of course, as the night wore on, my main focus was the biggest boxing event of the year, maybe even the last 24 months, Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis. And it was an excellent fight. Credit to both men for putting on the event of the year, an event that a lot of fighters would have shied away from putting on. They got together, they made it work. Regardless of the clauses in the contract, they made it happen, and you have to admire that. And when you go back and you watch that fight objectively, Gervonta Davis's fight against Ryan Garcia went exactly how we expected it to go. We knew that Ryan Garcia has built a brand off his fast flurries of punches, his lightning quick combinations, but we also know that Gervonta Tank Davis is just a different cat. He's a top 5 boxer in the world right now, pound for pound. He has so much ring time, such great experience, has been mentored by some of the best in the game, and he was going to make his bread and butter during that fight off counter punching, and that's exactly what he did. The first knockdown that he had against Ryan Garcia was a counter punch. That second knockdown, which was the KO, when Gervonta Davis KO'd Ryan Garcia, he showed, hey, you can hit me as much as you want. I'll withstand the flurries. I can hang with you. But when I get my opening, I'm going to let it rip. And Gervonta Davis unleashed some punishing body shots. He really worked Ryan Garcia towards the ending of that fight. And to Gervonta Davis's credit, he called his shot. He said he's going to be out in the 7th or 8th round. That's it. And in the 7th round, Gervonta Davis put Ryan Garcia on the canvas with a nasty body shot. People have been debating whether or not it was a rib shot or a liver shot, whatever the case may be. Gervonta Davis put him down. And I know maybe it's not the result that you guys wanted as fans or as internet fans, but you know what? It's exactly how we expected it to go. Gervonta Davis was the better boxer. He is the pound-for-pound better boxer. And while Ryan Garcia has some great intangibles and he's just a really talented guy, he's not as great as Gervonta Tank Davis. And maybe the weight training played a part into it. That we may never know. And I'm glad Ryan Garcia didn't use it as an excuse too much in the press conference, because he was like, look, I signed the contract, but at the end of the day, boxing is boxing. When you agree to something, once you step into the ring with those guys, there are no excuses. Barring unforeseen circumstances like injuries, that is the fight. The better man will win. And on Saturday night, the best fighter won. Gervonta Tank Davis emerged victorious, and he's entering a different level here as one of the best boxers in the world right now. And I can't wait to see who he fights next. I don't know who that is, but I'm sure we'll hear about it pretty soon. On Sunday, the New York Knicks earned a much-needed win over the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it was an important win for them in the series. It felt like things were slipping. It felt like they were losing control of the situation. This kind of reaffirmed their status and their overall culture as a team. This Knicks team does not have a bona fide superstar. They are going to have to work harder than the other teams that are left in this playoff series. So what did they do? They made their presence felt on the defensive side of the floor, which was important, and that'll be their recipe for success moving forward. They shut down Donovan Mitchell. They made him uncomfortable when he was shooting. The whole Cavs offensive lineup, they seemed like they were out of rhythm and out of sync. That's going to be what the Knicks need to do in order to win this series. And hopefully they can keep this magical run going, seeing as they are probably, we can agree, one of the less talented teams when we look at them from a player's perspective. But in that game, Julius Randle really upset me. And after the game, he chose not to speak with media after being benched. And normally I would understand if this was a loss. Look, the player's frustrated. They're in their feels. It is what it is. But in a game where you know your team won, and it meant so much to the team and to the fans that you guys were able to pull through with a win after what has been a very back and forth and difficult series, yes, I did have a problem with that. Julius Randle should have recognized, look, I was benched by Tom Thibodeau. I did not play well, but our team won. Let me go out there and show face, and let me show that I support my teammates. Instead, we're talking this morning about Julius Randle and how he made a really selfish move on Sunday night by saying, you know what, I got benched, I'm going to pout on the bench, I'm going to be frustrated, and then I'm not going to speak to media. He was not in sync with his team. It didn't look like he had a good relationship with them in that moment, which we know is not true. We know this team seems to have a good makeup and good chemistry, but it didn't look like it when Julius Randle is complaining about his own playing time and when the team wins. The team win was way more important than Julius Randle's lackluster performance. He should have known better in that moment, and I did have a massive problem with that because, like I said, it looked selfish in that moment when you know you played bad. Julius Randle, in 27 minutes, was 3 for 10 from field goal range, was 0 for 4 from three-point range, had a grand total of 7 points, and he's frustrated because Tom Thibodeau took him out of the game. Talk about a lack of self-awareness. I did not like that. That was not Julius Randle's brightest moment. So the NFL draft is upon us. Just 4 days from now, we're going to be talking about all the prospects. We'll finally get to see where they end up calling home, who gets picked where. So I'm really excited to see what happens. But on this week's show, I wanted to have someone on who really knew about these prospects, in particular the quarterback prospects, because we know there's been so much talk surrounding all of them. Who should go first? Who's the best? Who is the most pro-ready? All these different questions. So I think without further ado, it's time to introduce today's special guest. He's an NFL film analyst. Please help me welcome Alex Rollins. Alex, how are you doing today?
Benjamin, I'm good, man. I'm fired up. We got the draft a couple days away, and I'm excited to get down and dirty with these guys and figure out where everybody's going.
Me too. I'm really excited. So I'm going to start off with the headline that was all over the news pretty much Friday, all into the weekend. Everyone has been talking about it. CJ Stroud and his S2 test. Clearly, he didn't test as well as some of the other guys. And traditional grading scale, you'd think 18%, that's an F. Tell me, are we reading too much into that S2 test? What does the film say? Can he make decisions in the midst of chaos, which is what the S2 test tries to evaluate?
Well, as somebody who got a lot of F in school, Benjamin, I can attest to CJ Stroud. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I think the issue with the S2 test is we don't really know too much about it. I mean, right? This has only kind of gone into circulation in the last couple of years. So I think until we really, obviously, an 18% isn't ideal, but until we really see some correlation to that test really producing results in the NFL, I know some of the quarterbacks we've seen so far that have done really well all pretty much have those higher scores. But I think we need a little more background on the S2 test. But that's an aside. I'm always here to break down the film and analyze the prospect, what I see when he's actually watching the game. And for today's show, I thought I break it down kind of into traits in terms of traits that you can't teach, that is innate for the quarterback, that things we want to see pop up on film that we say, okay, this is what defines this player as somebody who's good and that you can't teach. He'll come into the NFL with these traits. And then things you can teach, more so things we need to clean up, where he can get better, what coaches and teams will be focused on in terms of producing a more NFL quality type of quarterback. So when we look at CJ Stroud, the things you can't teach about him, he's a very beautiful thrower of the football. He's able to, I think as fans, sometimes we get caught up, especially watching the combine, just seeing guys who are bombing the ball down the field, not necessarily the pass rush or different linebackers or safeties in the way, just kind of how this guy throws the ball just from a linear perspective from A to B. That's really not what football's about. I mean, 60-ish% of the game is played from 0 to 10 yards down the field. We're not seeing guys throw 70-yard bombs all the time. And when you look at CJ Stroud, as I said, he's a very beautiful thrower of the football, but he can change the speeds, and that's so important in the game. You need to be able to navigate different second-level defenders, third-level defenders. That's really where he's good at. He's one of the best spot throwers that I've seen in this class. And what I mean by that, it's kind of twofold. You have to be able to identify where to throw the ball, which is critically important. You have to be able to read the defense in a split second and say, okay, this is where I'm going to throw the ball. And then to be able to put that ball there, whether that's a fast throw, a slow throw, if you're lofting that over somebody, if it's man coverage, you need to throw it out in front of them. If it's zone coverage, you need to loft it over a second level defender. CJ Stroud is very, very good at that. And he's very natural at it. It's very comfortable for him. And he's able to play with great pace while doing that. His footwork is connected to his arm. And everything just it flows very nicely. And it's very easy to project that to the next level and say, okay, we can see these Saturday throws happen on Sunday. That's easy for him. When we look at some of the things that he can improve, where things he can be taught, one issue always with these Ohio State guys is their level of talent. They recruit so much higher, a higher level of talent than all the other teams that they're playing, right? So even Penn State, even Michigan, those are good teams. Ohio State just has, we've seen the receivers in the last few years, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, these guys going in the first round. We've seen the offensive line consistently. If you watch Ohio State on Saturdays, they give their quarterbacks so much room and so much time. You're not really seeing these condensed pockets, these pressured throws as much. So that's not so much CJ Stroud's fault. He can only do what he's given, right? He can only really play the play as he would. But it's something that has been an issue in the past where we see when Ohio State quarterbacks have played in the league and these talent levels are fairly even. And especially if you're going to an earlier pick like the Panthers or any of these teams like the Texans, that talent might even be lesser so. So we don't know what he looks like when he has that adversity. Things specifically to his game, he could speed up his game a little bit. I think, as I just said, with the offensive line giving him all that room, it doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessitate that quicker speed. He knows he has time. He's able to be relaxed in the pocket and sit back, and he's not necessarily always getting the ball out immediately when he needs to because he knows his receiver is going to have a lot of space and he won't have any pressure in the pocket. So I think when you see him get to that next level of the NFL, the game is much quicker. Those pockets are going to be more condensed. It's a little more of a question mark of can he just speed up his game a little bit and be able to get the ball out a little bit quicker because he won't have that extra second when he's on a team in the NFL. And I think that's really where kind of the rub is with him. I think to see him get to that higher level of processing, there's good processing, but at the same time with Ohio State's scheme, because of all these advantages they have with their talents, you just don't, it's not as easy to translate that style of game to the NFL as it is with somebody we'll get to in a bit with a Bryce Young, for example.
Absolutely. And it's measuring out those pros and cons, right? It's thinking, okay, he's played with great teammates. He's played in a great system. He's practically like Ohio State is considered wide receiver U. Will that talent drop off when he goes to one of these teams that in the NFL doesn't have as great a level of talent as other teams? Will it affect him? Will he be able to still be electric? And I think that's what confused me a little bit about the S2 test because everyone seems to think, the guys who really watch the film like you do, look, he throws a really pretty ball. He makes the right reads. He's putting the ball in the right spots. The question is, what is this S2 test? And of course, it might be a little bit too early for it to even have any validity, but we still make headlines out of it. So it is what it is. Moving on to one of the best prospects I've ever seen, Anthony Richardson. To me, he is the greatest athlete that I have ever seen in my lifetime at the quarterback position. The big thing with him, our red flag is, can he make the right reads? Can he be accurate? Because that was a massive problem in college. Tell me, do you think from what you've seen, will Anthony Richardson be able to make the right reads at the next level?
It's very challenging, Benjamin. And I obviously we've all seen what you've seen. I completely agree. It's an unbelievable. If you're looking at his highlight reel, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, he's ripping off 80-yard runs. He's throwing balls, very natural motion too, by the way, where sometimes you see these guys with big arms who maybe haven't been as productive like Richardson. He's actually very comfortable looking in terms of just his ability to throw the football. It comes off very easily. So I think that is a positive with him. When looking at like the can teach stuff, like I was talking about, I agree with you. One of the best arms in football in terms of arm strength, I think right off the bat going into the NFL, I think he's a top 5 arm talent, or at least in terms of arm strength. I think his top 5 arm strength pretty easily too. I don't think that's even much of a question. And so that's enticing. And then his athleticism, not even just straight line. He's able to dip around different guys. He's able to move in the pocket surprisingly well for somebody who, with the narrative going in that this guy isn't as developed and hasn't played as much. He's played less than 20 career starts, I believe, which is barely any. You usually see guys getting more in the 50, 60, 70 range. So in terms of that athleticism, it's unbelievable. I think the talent, you could say, hey, if this guy, what makes him so enticing is that, hey, if this guy hits, if we can develop him quickly and effectively, he will be the best quarterback in the NFL, top two, top three. I think that ceiling it's easily, without a doubt, that ceiling is there. And you could kind of say with the other prospects, hey, this guy we could get him to a really good level, but I don't know if we get that top two, top three level. Anthony Richardson, I mean, a Cam Newton level with him. We don't always see quarterbacks, at least in the past around Cam Newton's time, those guys being featured in the run game. Nowadays, quarterback run game is what it's all about, right? Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, these guys, NFL teams are much more comfortable making their quarterback a huge part of the run game. And that's where Anthony Richardson is so exciting. But getting back to what you were saying, where there's some issues with accuracy, we see some issues with processing. Having a guy who has that little experience is kind of a red flag. One issue with when you pop the film on with Florida, we all know that he had a 55% completion percentage, which is a red flag right there. That's very concerning. With Florida, I will say if you look at his target heat map, which just shows where he's targeting his receivers compared to the league average, or at least the nation's average, Florida is trying to gun the ball down the field consistently. So they're not really throwing screens at all. They're not really throwing RPOs. They basically put him on hard mode. They put him on all Madden right from the get-go and made things really challenging for him. They didn't give him a lot of gimmies. They ran a lot of play action, but the scheme wasn't very effective. There wasn't a lot of wide open guys. It would be challenging for any prospect to really excel in that type of system. And so I think I'll temper the worries a little bit by when looking at that number, like the 55% completion. It's not as bad as it looks, but getting to the things that he can clean up, that he needs to be taught, there's a lot of issues. There's consistency with footwork is a big one. His accuracy can be erratic. He can spray the ball, especially when he's on the run. Everything can kind of go haywire, and he can just dirt balls when he has wide open guys in the flat. He is the main guy where I say we always hear every draft cycle that this guy needs to sit a year and then play in year two. This guy needs a lot of time to just be able to sit down and learn and just take reps in practice. I think when we hear that narrative about this guy needs to sit there and learn, when you don't have that many starts under your belt, especially in college, so much of it is mental. So imagine going into maybe the hardest test of your life in school and you're just not prepared for it. You're not going to be able to just sit there comfortably and even just read the questions. Obviously, it's going to be hard to answer them, but you're going to be anxious, right? You're just not comfortable. He needs to take mental reps to be able to learn the playbook, get all of that solidified, at least to a degree, so then he can go in and just let his athleticism do the talking more so. So he's not overwhelmed. Guys who aren't prepared mentally aren't going to be able to perform because they're thinking. So I think that's a part of it. I think he hasn't taken the reps mentally just because he hasn't played enough. So that's what I would worry about in terms of his development. And then just being an NFL style concepts in terms of his footwork, his timing, that just takes time. That takes reps. You don't even if you're a great athlete and you can flash good pocket presence, which he does every now and then, he can sit in the pocket. He can slightly move up here and there, and he can occasionally get to his second or third read. But you just don't see it happen often. And I think that's the worry, where you're worried that if he gets thrown out there right away, in terms of sink or swim, he's just going to sink. And then he'll lose his confidence, and we won't get to see those great athletic gifts and that arm strength and arm power. So with Richardson, I think the lack of experience is what I'm most concerned about. I think that he'll obviously need to be in a scheme that's more tailored to his gifts, and a very play action heavy scheme, which was similar to what they ran at Florida, I think is critical. I think if you're going to ask this guy to drop back and just normally drop back on, let's say it's 3rd and 10, and you're running that style of offense where he has to get through 3, 4, 5 reads. He's reading complex coverages. The safety's coming down. The safety's rotating. We're getting wild pressures from the outside or the inside. I think that's the kind of stuff where you need to sit and practice and just learn and take those reps. I think that's what we need to see from him in terms of him being a successful NFL quarterback. And if he goes in the top, I thought that the idea that he was going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, I just don't see that. I don't think if you're going to take a guy who's just not ready and he has that many question marks just in terms of his experience and then some of the things we see pop up on tape in terms of the accuracy and footwork, that would be a huge concern to me. And I'm also not even the one whose job is riding on this guy being successful. So I do think he'll slide a little bit, honestly. I don't think it'll be anything too extreme, but if he went at the end of the first round or the top of the second, I wouldn't even be that shocked. I think it's easy to see all those things you talked about where he has that great potential, but at the same time, that potential doesn't show up on every snap when you're playing quarterback. It's making those little reads, it's hitting that 5 yard out route. You need to do that over and over and over. And those are the kind of things I'm concerned with Richardson for.
Yeah, I think the simplest way of putting it when it comes to him is we know he can hit home runs, right? I want to see him get base hits. I want to see him do the little things. And that's why, to me, I was just really thinking about this as you were speaking about it. I think, quarterbacks right now are so overvalued in the draft, and I understand what you're saying. Ideally, he would go at the end of the first round, but just in today's NFL culture, we probably won't see that. I would think. I could be totally wrong. For me, stylistically, I feel like the best fit for him would be the Colts because of that strong offensive line, because Shane Steichen, who was the Eagles OC, who was the coach for Jalen Hurts, is now the Colts head coach. And I think culturally, the best fit would be Seattle. And you're hearing a lot of rumors about that being the pick for them if he is there this morning. So do you agree with me on that? Do you see that? Or are you thinking someone else is a better fit for him?
No, I think the Colts is a very natural landing spot, as you said. It makes sense with Steichen. I think the issue is with Jalen Hurts, he had that luxury of sitting for basically a year, and he didn't have the pressure necessarily. I mean, when he was drafted, they had Carson Wentz, who they thought at the time was going to be that guy. And they really took Hurts as kind of not a luxury pick, but kind of Wentz kept getting injured, right? So they said, okay, we need a guy who's gonna back this guy up. And when we get to the playoffs, and if Wentz gets concussed again, we'll have at least a very legitimate backup quarterback who can maybe, pull out a win here and there. And then Hurts blossomed into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So that worked out very well. But I think when looking at, let's say you draft him at 4, if you're the Colts, they don't have a quarterback right now. Who is the guy who's going to be playing right now? Because I just don't think that Richardson is ready day one right out of the box. So I think obviously when you don't have a quarterback, when you do draft a quarterback, it's usually for a need, and it is the most important position in football. But what is that need that's being filled, right? I just don't think he's going to be ready day one. I think he does need to sit. So I love the fit. I think Steichen obviously knows how to use a quarterback like that because we've just seen that, and he developed Hurts over that time. But we also have to be realistic in terms of what Hurts' path was, where he wasn't ready to go day one, and that expectation wasn't there for him. There's a lot of pressure on you if you're getting drafted 4 overall compared to early second round or wherever Hurts went. So that would be my issue a little bit if they did somehow have a plan where they had some sort of veteran. I don't know. They don't have that right now. They don't have that guy who's on the roster who can, okay, let's even pretend he's going to start for 4 games, right? I mean, sometimes we had an Andy Dalton type in there, and he's supposed to start for a year, and then Andy Dalton's 1-3 and not playing very good football, and then we rush the quarterback out there. We don't even have that style of guy. So I like the fit, but I'm just worried about the structure of their organization and their roster right now. I just don't know if it's feasible, honestly. And then, as you said, to Seattle, that's something that intrigues me more. They do have that guy there right now. Geno Smith just signed the extension. Geno's obviously a really incredible clubhouse guy, locker room guy. So that's more interesting to me. I think Pete Carroll is an incredible coach. I think with the end of the Russell Wilson tenure, he got a little underrated, honestly. People like to crap on him, but I think he would be able to change that offense enough if Richardson eventually started playing there and started being their quarterback, and would be able to mold that offense around them instead of trying to force him into something that wouldn't be good. So the Seahawks, if they're at 5, they're there. If they want to pull the trigger, I it would be a fit that I would be excited for if I was Richardson's agent or if I was Richardson. I just still don't know myself if I'd be comfortable pulling the trigger that early, to be honest.
I get it. And I think back to the ability to sit a quarterback and how much value there is in that. But like you said, the Colts really don't have anyone. Seattle, the more you talk about it, it seems like the perfect situation. I mean, Pete Carroll to me is so interesting because I don't think of him as an older head coach because of his energy, the passion that he still has. He feels like a young guy. So very interesting dynamic. I can't wait to see how that plays out. If they still have a chance to draft him at 5, that would just be magical and storybook. But I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to Will Levis. To me, the Will Levis thing fascinates me because I thought as the college football season was coming to a close in December and January, I assumed as we got closer to the draft, we always see a quarterback who wasn't one of these SEC guys, but who has the raw intangibles and the talent to the point where we start talking about him as the draft approaches as, oh, that could be a guy. He could go as the second overall quarterback off the board or the third. And that never really happened for him because Richardson had such a good combine, because Bryce Young had such a, expected pro day where he did well. CJ Stroud, same thing. Like, he didn't separate himself from the pack at any of those individual events. And so I think what I expected to happen didn't, in the sense that we weren't talking about him more. I do think, I have a hunch that he'll be the most accurate quarterback out of the gate, out of this rookie class, just because he's used to throwing to tight windows and not playing with top-tier talent since he's coming from Kentucky. Tell me, what does the film show you? Could he end up being one of the better prospects, and why are we not talking about him more?
Yeah, he's had a very interesting draft cycle. I think if you look at the odds right now, he's projected to go number 2. He has the highest odds to go 2. But you're right. I think sometimes early on in draft cycles, we see kind of a narrative where people kind of like to crap on Levis at the beginning. And then that just got kind of blown out of proportion where all of a sudden he's the worst, he's a bust. And I don't see that. I don't think I'm quite as high on and two is pretty rich, I think. I think we've seen him mocked at 7-ish to the Raiders or kind of later in the top 10. And I think that's more where I would land at with him. In terms of what do we see on the film, I think Benjamin, you made a great point that at Kentucky, they're in the SEC and they're facing Bama, they're facing LSU, teams that have much higher levels of talent surrounding them. And Will Levis had to face off against those guys all the time with that D line, with those cornerbacks. He wasn't going in kind of the opposite of CJ Stroud. He wasn't going in knowing, all right, I can just sit here in the pocket and uncork some long balls to my guys outside, and they'll just make a jump catch and la di da. But so I think that is an important element, especially when watching his film. I think what we see on film, some of the things you can't teach. He has a physical toughness to him that is something you cannot teach. He is willing to take a hit. Sometimes a red flag for me when I'm watching film is you see a guy kind of stray away a little bit from pressure. He has a free runner coming. Free runners are going to come in college football and the NFL. It's going to happen. Sometimes a guy's going to be unblocked and you just have to hit your hot throw and get it out quick. But sometimes you see those guys just not super comfortable taking those hits, even in the NFL, and that's going to affect your accuracy. Will Levis has the mental toughness to be able to take those hits over and over and over again and get right back up no matter what. His physical tools, we've all seen the TikToks, the Instagrams. This guy is a cannon, man. This guy, it is unbelievable. We were just talking about Richardson. Those guys have top tier arms. He's not quite at the Richardson level, but Will Levis has a legitimate NFL arm to where, hey, when we're talking about how these guys develop, guy like him, guy like Richardson, they can get away with a little bit more stuff where maybe they're a tick slower on their reads and progressions because they just have those cannons where they can make up for it. So that is a major positive for him. He has the stature. His body is strong. He's able to take those hits. He has a cannon. There are some really good elements of his mental processing. He pretty much both years played, or at least the last 2 years, played in that kind of Kyle Shanahan type scheme. 2 years ago was Liam Cohen. He had a great year. Cohen was from the Rams with McVay. and then Rick Scangarello, who actually was with the Niners a while ago. They actually both implemented pretty much the same exact scheme. And Levis takes command at the line of scrimmage. Basically, in that Shanahan scheme, you get 2 plays at the line, and you're looking at certain things. You're looking at, okay, they're playing 1 high, 2 high, or is the 3 technique here? Is he a 1 tech? Is he shading over? Based on that, those elements for whatever the play call is, the quarterback can change to either a pass to a run, a man beater to a zone beater. He's able to basically put his team in the best possible position based on where one specific guy is on the defense. And when you watch the film, Levis is doing that consistently. He's doing that over and over and over. If a guy is supposed to be on the ball and he's off the ball, Levis knows it every time. He's redirecting his team. He has a very good command at the line of scrimmage at the beginning of the play. And he does flash good mental processing after the play. And what that means is he's not necessarily just looking at his first read every time and just throwing there. He's able to read the defense. If a safety flies down all of a sudden and covers his first read, he can get to his second. He can flash his ability to go all the way back across the field. So let's say he starts from the right and there's 2 reads to the right, and then he's a third coming in on a dig on the inside. He can hit that guy. He has shown that on film. And why that's tricky is because you basically can't see that throw if you're going back over the middle. If you're starting from one side, going back over the middle, you have to have basically an innate ability to read multiple guys, almost the entire defense, to know that a linebacker isn't just sitting right there. And Levis does have that ability, or at least he flashes it. I think really when we get to some of the things he struggles with in terms of the things you can teach, the things he needs to improve, it's consistency. I think we saw 2 years ago with Cohen. He had a really, really good year. He put some really good film out there for the NFL, and I think that's why he came into the year with a lot of hype. And then this last year, I saw a lot of things with Scangarello's scheme that basically just set Levis up to fail, which is really challenging to evaluate because then you don't know, okay, basically when the play starts, this guy doesn't have as good of a chance as he should because the scheme has maybe a free runner coming or 2 receivers in the same spot, or maybe the progression just seems kind of wonky. You're not really sure what's going on. But that could also be on the quarterback for, at the end of the day, the result isn't there and the quarterback isn't making the play. So I think that muddies things up a little bit. I think that he doesn't always have great accuracy. I think you want to see the ball out in front of the receiver to create that extra yards after the catch. You don't always see that with Levis. Sometimes he's putting it on your back hip so the receiver has to slow down a bit. He had a big issue with go balls where he does have a really, really strong arm, but he was just sailing balls out of bounds, not even giving his receiver a chance to make a play whatsoever. So that's concerning. There are things you can clean up. There's things you can teach him in terms of footwork, in terms of connecting his upper body to his feet, to his footwork, and making sure his timing is a little bit synced up. But we don't always see that with him. But accuracy, at the end of the day, if it's not there on film consistently, that's always going to be a red flag, and that's always going to be a concern. So I think that, going back to your question, I do think that he has, I don't really like the whole risen and fallen thing. I think guys have put their film out there and NFL teams have evaluated that film, and it doesn't suddenly change, whether it's the combine or the pro day. So I don't buy necessarily that he fell and then he rose back up. But I think too, if that's where he's going to go on Thursday night, I think Benjamin, that also seems a little bit rich to me. I would personally like to see him as well as somebody who sits and waits a little bit. I don't know if he, not to the same extent as Anthony Richardson, but I want to see him get really comfortable in the scheme that he's in and really solidify everything around him so that he can work on himself and work on the things that he needs to get better at in terms of the accuracy and some of the other inconsistencies in his game. So I'm a little hesitant at 2 if I'm the Texans.
Alex, I appreciate your time. You've given us a great breakdown today. They can go check out your channel, everyone watching right now. It's Alex Rollins NFL, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome. I appreciate your time. Make sure to go and check him out. I fell in love with his breakdowns. He sees things that no one else seems to. Alex, I really appreciate your time today.
Benjamin, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
And with that, we conclude this week's episode of the Benjamin Cure Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with our guest, Alex Rollins. He was great. He gave so much valuable insight on these quarterback prospects, and I just can't wait to see where they end up. Until next time, I'm Benjamin Cure. Enjoy the NFL draft. I'll see you back next week.